My husband cheating exposed at our family reunion. The call I answered unraveled his affair, and what followed stunned everyone. I never meant to look at Robert's phone that night. 5 years of marriage had built a foundation of trust between us, or so I believed. The steam from his shower still fogged the bathroom mirror as I folded laundry on our bed. The mundane rhythm of domestic life playing out like any other Tuesday. Then his phone lit up on the nightstand. A single notification cut through the dimness of our bedroom. Missed the way you touched me last night. Can't wait until next week. My hands froze mid-fold on one of his button-down shirts. The preview text glowed accusingly from the lock screen. Robert had been on a business trip last night, a monthly occurrence with his real estate development firm. I set down the shirt with deliberate care, as if the fabric had suddenly become fragile. Before we continue with Sarah's journey, I want to pause for a moment. If you've ever felt that gnawing suspicion something wasn't right, or admired someone who found strength after betrayal, this story will resonate deeply. Please consider subscribing. It's completely free and connects you with others who appreciate these raw tales of reclaiming personal power. Now, let's dive in. I picked up his phone, telling myself there must be some explanation. A work colleague making an inappropriate joke, a text meant for someone else. Anything but what my instincts were screaming at me. The message disappeared as the screen timed out, and I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. When Robert emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, I kept folding clothes with mechanical precision. He noticed nothing unusual as he checked his phone, his face briefly illuminated by the screen's glow. I watched from the corner of my eye as his expression softened into a small smile before he typed a quick response. That smile, I'd thought it belonged only to me. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping on his pajama bottoms. "Fine," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just tired." Sleep never came that night. I lay beside him, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing while my mind constructed and discarded 100 different scenarios. By morning, one thought crystallized through the fog of shock. I needed proof. For 3 days, I maintained our normal routine. Breakfast together before work, texts throughout the day, dinner and TV in the evening. I played the role of contented wife while tracking his late-night phone habits and noting the passcode he entered when he thought I wasn't watching. On Friday, when he left his phone to grab coffee from the kitchen, I made my move. The message thread was there under a contact simply labeled M. Dozens of exchanges stretched back 4 months. Intimate details, meeting arrangements, photos I couldn't bring myself to open. I took screenshots of the most damning evidence, sending them to my own private email before carefully backing out of the apps, leaving everything as I found it. The following Thursday, Robert packed for another overnight client meeting in Detroit. I kissed him goodbye at the door, my lips curved into the same trusting smile I'd perfected over our years together. "Drive safely," I said, like always. "I'll call you when I get to the hotel," he promised, like always. 20 minutes later, I was in my own car, following his familiar silver Audi at a careful distance. I'd never tailed anyone before, but I'd watched enough crime shows to maintain 3 cars between us, switching lanes periodically to avoid detection. The knot in my stomach tightened as he passed the exit for downtown Detroit, continuing another 15 miles to a boutique hotel in Birmingham, an upscale suburb we'd visited together for anniversary dinners. I parked across the street, watching as he checked in with the casual confidence of a regular guest. 40 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the lot. From it emerged a tall blonde woman in a fitted business suit whom I recognized immediately, Melissa Winters, the new agent at his firm. I'd met her at the company Christmas party just 3 months ago, where Robert had introduced us with his hand resting casually on my lower back. My phone captured their embrace in the lobby. Too intimate for colleagues, too familiar for a first encounter. Something inside me cracked as they walked toward the elevator, his hand finding the small of her back in the exact same way it had once guided me. That weekend, while Robert golfed with clients, I created an encrypted folder on my cloud drive, named Home Renovation Ideas, knowing he'd never bother to look inside. Into it went the screenshots, the photos from the hotel, and a document where I began detailing dates, inconsistencies in his stories, and unexplained expenses I found while combing through our joint accounts. $340 at Tiffany's in February. I'd received no jewelry for Valentine's Day. $180 at Giovanni's restaurant, an intimate Italian place, on a night he claimed to be at a business dinner at the steakhouse downtown. 3 separate gas receipts from stations along the route to Birmingham, when he should have been in Detroit. Each new piece of evidence was another fracture in the image of our perfect marriage. The beautiful home in the suburbs, the plans for children next year, the vacations we'd meticulously saved for. I'd built my entire identity around being Robert's wife, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath my feet. On our 5th wedding anniversary, while we drank champagne at the restaurant where he'd proposed, I made my decision. The waiter had just brought our dessert, chocolate souffle with 2 spoons. When Robert's phone buzzed, he glanced at it, made a poor excuse about checking work emails, and typed a quick response. I recognized the smile he tried to hide, the same one I'd seen that first night after the shower. "Is everything okay at the office?" I asked innocently. "Just Johnson being anxious about the Westbrook property." He lied smoothly, sliding his phone back into his jacket pocket. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." That's when I knew I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. A hasty confrontation would give him time to hide assets, delete evidence, or spin stories to our friends and family. Instead, I would be methodical, calculated. I would gather irrefutable proof and prepare myself legally before pulling the trigger. The perfect opportunity would present itself, and when it did, I would be ready. The morning after our anniversary dinner, I called in sick to my job at the elementary school for the first time in 3 years. As a fifth-grade teacher, I prided myself on my reliability. My students needed consistency, but today, I needed answers more than my students needed their spelling lesson. I waited until Robert backed his Audi out of the driveway, his travel mug of coffee in hand and his goodbye kiss still cool against my cheek. Then I began my real work. Our home office had always been Robert's domain. Though we shared the space technically, his large mahogany desk dominated the room, while my small writing table sat in the corner. A fitting metaphor for our marriage, I now realized. His desk drawers weren't locked. Why would they be? Trust had never been questioned between us. The first two drawers contained ordinary office supplies, folders of home maintenance records, and our tax returns. The bottom drawer stuck slightly, requiring an extra tug. Inside, beneath hanging files of mundane documents, I found a small burgundy folder tucked at the very back. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside were receipts, dozens of them, meticulously organized by date, dinner for two at Morton's, $312, a weekend at the Townsend Hotel where he'd supposedly been at a real estate conference, $760, a gold bracelet from Tiffany's, $1,200. My birthday had come and gone in March, with only a bouquet of flowers and a dinner I had cooked myself. Each receipt was like a photograph, a snapshot of his other life that existed parallel to ours. I spread them across the desk, arranging them chronologically, and a clear pattern emerged, every third Thursday, sometimes extending to Friday morning, occasionally a Tuesday evening, always the same hotel, usually the same restaurant. My next stop was our bank website. I'd always managed our household accounts, so I knew all the passwords. While I'd noticed the charges before, I'd never scrutinized each transaction, trusting Robert's explanations of client dinners and professional development seminars. Now I downloaded 6 months of credit card statements, highlighting every charge that aligned with his pattern of deception. The office felt too small suddenly, the walls closing in with each new discovery. I moved to the dining room table, spreading out my growing collection of evidence. The organizational skills that made me an effective teacher now served a different purpose as I created a detailed spreadsheet of dates, times, locations, and amounts. By noon, I had charted 8 months of consistent meetings, their relationship beginning shortly after Melissa joined his firm. And still, I needed more. I needed to hear it for myself. That evening, I suggested we clean out the spare bedroom to prepare it for future plans. Robert didn't question my sudden nesting instinct. We'd been talking about starting a family for months. Together, we rearranged furniture, bringing in a desk from the basement to create a temporary workspace. I might grade papers in here sometimes, I explained. The light is better. The truth, the spare room shared a wall with our bedroom. That night, after installing a voice recording app on my phone, I left it hidden between books on the new desk before joining Robert for our evening routine. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight, I told him. I've got that slight headache again, and I don't want to disturb you if I can't sleep. His concern seemed genuine, as he brought me pain relievers and a glass of water. Once alone, I waited, listening to the familiar sounds of our home settling for the night. Around 11:30, I heard it, the low murmur of Robert's voice through the wall. The recording caught everything, his whispered endearments, plans for their next meeting, complaints about having to attend my cousin's wedding that weekend. I'd rather be with you, he told her, his voice tender in a way it hadn't been with me in months. Sleep eluded me as I re-listened to the recording 3 times, each word another nail in the coffin of our marriage. By morning, my decision was made. This wasn't a one-time mistake, this was calculated, ongoing betrayal. I called an attorney the next day, not our family lawyer who had handled our house purchase and wills, but Diana Moore, a name I'd heard mentioned by a colleague who'd gone through a brutal divorce last year. Diana's office was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of dark wood and leather, her space was filled with plants and natural light. The woman herself, with her silver-streaked bob and bright blue reading glasses perched on her nose, projected calm competence rather than aggressive litigation. Tell me everything, she said after introductions. And don't leave anything out. The surprises hurt most in court. For an hour I laid out my discoveries while she took notes on a yellow legal pad. She asked pointed questions about our finances, property, and the evidence I'd collected. Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, Diana explained when I finished, but that doesn't mean evidence of infidelity is irrelevant. It can influence property division, especially if he spent substantial marital assets on this relationship. She handed me a folder with information about divorce proceedings and a checklist of documents to gather. Start securing copies of all financial records, investment accounts, retirement funds, property deeds, insurance policies. Establish your own bank account if you don't have one. And Sarah, she added, sliding her business card across the desk, don't tip your hand too early. The element of surprise is sometimes our best advantage. I nodded, feeling more in control than I had in weeks. How much more evidence do I need? Diana leaned back in her chair, studying me over her glasses. You've got a solid start, but if possible, I'd like photographs placing them together, additional recordings establishing the relationships, nature, and documentation of any major purchases he's made for her. The more comprehensive our evidence, the stronger our position for negotiation. As I drove home, Diana's words echoed in my mind. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a case. And for the first time since finding that text message, I felt something beyond pain and betrayal. I felt purpose. Robert would be out of town again next Thursday. I marked the date on my calendar and began planning my next move. Thursday arrived with relentless spring rain that matched my mood. I'd planned this day meticulously, calling in a personal day at school and telling Robert I had a dentist appointment followed by lunch with my sister. He kissed me goodbye, reminding me he'd be home late due to a client dinner, Another lie to add to my growing collection. I waited 30 minutes after he left, then drove to Carson Realty's gleaming office building downtown. The rain provided perfect cover. Umbrella tilted forward, raincoat collar up. I was just another anonymous visitor seeking shelter from the downpour. The reception area buzzed with morning activity as agents filtered in, shaking off umbrellas and clutching coffee cups. "I'm looking for Melissa Winters," I told the receptionist, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm interested in listing my property." "Miss Winters is in a morning meeting," she replied. "Would you like to leave your information?" "Actually, I'll wait," I said, settling into a chair with a clear view of the office floor. Through the glass partitions, I could see Robert in the conference room standing at a whiteboard, the quarterly sales meeting he'd mentioned last week. 20 minutes later, the meeting broke up. Agents spilled out into the main floor, Robert among them, laughing with a tall blonde woman, Melissa Winters. I'd seen her at the hotel and at last year's Christmas party, but now I studied her with new eyes, designer suit, perfect manicure, wedding ring conspicuously absent. She touched Robert's arm as they talked, the gesture casual but intimate, too intimate. I slipped out before either could spot me, my reconnaissance mission complete. Back in my car, I pulled up the company website on my phone, navigating to the Our Team page. Melissa's professional biography revealed she joined the firm 18 months ago after relocating from Chicago. 18 months. The timeline matched perfectly with when Robert's behavior had begun to change. At home, I opened our wedding album, a beautiful leather-bound book I hadn't looked at in months. I flipped through reception photos, scanning faces in the background, looking for someone I'd missed before. And there she was, in a group shot at table 7. Melissa Winters, 5 years younger with darker hair but unmistakably her, smiling next to Robert's college roommate, Tom. She'd been at our wedding, witnessed our vows, eaten our food, then systematically worked to dismantle everything those vows represented. The betrayal twisted deeper, more personal than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about sex or emotional connection. This was about someone who had observed our happiness and deliberately targeted it. Or had Robert been the instigator? The sick feeling in my stomach intensified as questions multiplied without answers. I needed more information. Tom might know something. He and Robert still played basketball monthly. I scrolled through my contacts and composed a carefully casual text. "Hi, Tom. Putting together a surprise for Robert's birthday. Didn't you bring a friend to our wedding? Melissa something? Does she still live in the area?" His reply came an hour later, Melissa Winters. "Yeah, she's actually working with Rob now. Small world, right? They've gotten pretty close. She still asks about Rob whenever I see her." The words "pretty close" stared back at me from the screen. How many people knew? How many friends had chosen loyalty to Robert over basic human decency? I turned to technology next, logging into our family cloud account to search for any digital breadcrumbs. Robert wasn't particularly tech-savvy. He often needed my help syncing devices or backing up photos. This carelessness became my advantage. In a subfolder labeled Work Conference San Diego, I found them. Photos never meant for my eyes. Robert and Melissa on a beach at sunset, intimate dinner photos with wine glasses raised in toast, a selfie of them kissing on a hotel balcony with the ocean behind them. The timestamp, 3 months ago, during his supposed regional sales conference. The background showed clearly the Coronado Beach Resort, definitely not the downtown Marriott where the conference had been held. I forwarded the evidence to my secure email, hands shaking with a mixture of vindication and devastation. Each discovery was both a victory for my case and another wound to my heart. The next day, I ran into Jessica, another agent from Carson Realty, at the grocery store. We'd been friendly at company events, though not close. I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking of stopping by the office to surprise Robert for lunch. "Oh, Fridays are his off-site days with Melissa," she said absently, examining avocados. "They usually work from that coffee shop on Maple." Her expression shifted as she realized what she'd revealed. "I mean, they have client meetings. How long has that been their routine?" I asked, my voice betraying nothing. Jessica looked uncomfortable. "Maybe ask Robert. I don't want to get in the middle." "Of course," I smiled reassuringly. "Just curious about his schedule." That evening, I received a text from Jessica. "I'm sorry about earlier. It felt wrong not to say something. Everyone at the office knows about them. It's been going on for at least a year. Robert claimed you two had an understanding. I should have said something sooner." An understanding. The audacity of his lies stunned me. He'd not only betrayed me, but had created a narrative that made me complicit in my own humiliation. Back at my laptop, I created a new document in my evidence folder, Timeline of Betrayal. Meticulously, I plotted every date, location, witness account, and piece of evidence. 18 months of deception, laid out in cold, hard facts. The pattern was unmistakable. What had begun as occasional meetings had evolved into regular rendezvous, growing bolder and more frequent. Diana had advised collecting comprehensive evidence. And now I had it. Financial records, photographs, witness statements, and a detailed timeline spanning a year and a half of my marriage. The case was solid, yet something made me hesitate before calling her. The final piece was still missing, the perfect moment to reveal what I knew, a moment that would leave no room for Robert's excuses or manipulation. The answer came when I checked our shared calendar. In 2 weeks, the annual Carson family reunion at our lake house. Robert's parents, siblings, cousins, everyone who mattered to him would be there. I picked up my phone and called Diana. "I'm ready to proceed," I told her, "but I need your advice on timing." "The family reunion is perfect timing," Diana said, her voice calm and measured through the phone. "But are you absolutely certain you want to do it so publicly?" I stood at our kitchen window, looking out at the lake that had sold us on this house 3 years ago. The water rippled in the afternoon sunlight, deceptively peaceful. Yes, I answered without hesitation. He humiliated me in front of his entire office. Let him face the consequences in front of his family. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Robert's mother, Eleanor. The annual Carson family reunion had rotated between homes for generations. This year had been scheduled at Robert's brother's place in Grand Rapids, but with a new baby and recent renovation delays, he was struggling to host. We'd be happy to host at the lake house, I wrote, infusing the message with my usual warmth. The weather should be perfect, and we haven't had everyone over since we finished the deck expansion. Eleanor's enthusiastic acceptance arrived within the hour, along with offers to help coordinate. Robert was thrilled when I told him that evening, kissing my cheek and calling me the perfect wife. I smiled and leaned into his embrace, wondering if he could feel how rigid my body had become at his touch. The next 2 weeks became an exercise in strategic planning and emotional compartmentalization. By day, I was the devoted wife preparing to welcome her extended family, ordering supplies, planning menus, coordinating sleeping arrangements for out-of-town guests. By night, I methodically prepared for the aftermath of what I would do. I visited our bank on a quiet Tuesday morning, requesting access to our safe deposit box. Inside, I added my grandmother's jewelry and the deed to the small cabin in northern Michigan that I'd inherited before our marriage. Then, I opened a new box in my name only, securing copies of our financial records, my evidence folder, and a set of house and car keys. That same afternoon, I opened a separate checking account at a different bank, transferring a modest amount from my personal savings, enough to cover immediate expenses after the explosion, but not so much that Robert could claim financial impropriety. Just organizing my classroom supply fund, I explained when he questioned the bank statement. He accepted the explanation without further inquiry, his attention already drifting to his phone where Melissa had undoubtedly texted. The guest list required careful consideration. Eleanor and William, Robert's parents, were non-negotiable. They'd always treated me like a daughter, and their presence would ensure maximum impact. His brother James and sister-in-law Caitlin, with their new baby, would provide the wholesome family contrast. His sister Emily, always my strongest ally in the family, would be crucial support. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins completed the tableau of witnesses. 10 days before the reunion, I stood in our walk-in closet, mentally dividing our possessions. The cashmere sweaters he'd given me for Christmas. Did I even want them anymore? The framed photos throughout the house. Which would I take when this was over? I removed my most treasured possessions discreetly, a few items each day, storing them in the trunk of my car before transferring them to my sister's garage. Spring cleaning, I told Robert when he noticed missing items, just decluttering before everyone arrives. Each night after he fell asleep, I practiced in the bathroom mirror the exact words I would say, the precise tone, not hysterical, not bitter, but calm and resolute. I rehearsed different scenarios. If he denied everything, if he tried to turn the family against me, if he became angry. I prepared for every possibility except the one I feared most. That when the moment came, my resolve would crumble under the weight of 5 years of love and shared dreams. A week before the reunion, I visited the lake house alone, ostensibly to begin preparations. In reality, I needed time and the space to mentally block out how the scene would unfold. I stood in the great room, mapping the likely positions of family members, considering sightlines and acoustics. Where would Robert be standing? Where should I position myself for maximum control of the situation? It was theatrical direction for the most important performance of my life. I rehung family photos that suddenly felt like props. Robert and me on our honeymoon in Bali, the whole Carson clan at last year's reunion, the professional portrait we'd taken for our Christmas card. Behind each smiling image lay 1,000 moments of genuine happiness that now felt contaminated. Had he been thinking of her even then? Had any of it been real? 3 days before the event, I met with Diana again, reviewing our strategy for the immediate aftermath. Have a backpack, she advised. Once it happens, you'll want space from each other. Do you have somewhere to stay? My sister's, I confirmed. She's prepared the guest room. Good. And you've secured your important documents? I nodded, patting my purse where copies of our marriage certificate, tax returns, and property deeds now resided alongside my driver's license and credit cards. I want to make sure you remember this is going to be emotionally taxing, Diana said, her typically brisk tone softening. No matter how prepared you are, when the moment comes, it will hurt. Are you absolutely sure this is how you want to handle it? For a moment, doubt crept in. Would a private confrontation be kinder, more dignified? Then I remembered Jessica's text. Robert claimed you two had an understanding. The public humiliation he'd already subjected me to while painting himself as the reasonable husband in an open marriage. I'm sure, I said firmly. He doesn't deserve privacy or dignity. Not anymore. The day before the reunion, I made one final preparation. I wrote a letter to Robert, sealing it in an envelope to give him afterward. Not a letter of explanation, as he deserved none, but a letter of goodbye to the man I had thought he was, the life I had believed we shared. Writing it was cathartic, releasing emotions I couldn't afford to express during tomorrow's calculated confrontation. That night, Robert wrapped his arms around me in bed, whispering how grateful he was for handling the reunion preparations, how lucky he felt to have me. I lay still in his embrace, my body a perfect alabaster statue of wifely devotion, while inside, a storm gathered strength. Tomorrow the stage would be set, the actors would take their places, and the performance of a lifetime would begin. The morning of the reunion dawned with perfect blue skies, the kind of late spring day that had sold us on the lake house in the first place. I woke before Robert, sliding quietly from bed to begin preparations with a calm I didn't truly feel. By the time he joined me in the kitchen, I was arranging pastries on my grandmother's antique serving tray. "You didn't have to let me sleep in," he said, kissing my cheek. "I could have helped." I smiled, the expression now so practiced it felt like a mask I could slip on and off at will. "You'll have plenty to do once everyone arrives," your mother texted. "They're about 30 minutes out." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. I moved through our home with mechanical efficiency, setting out drinks, arranging furniture on the deck, placing flowers in strategic locations. Robert manned the grill, occasionally catching my eye to smile or wink conspiratorially, as if we were teammates hosting this gathering rather than performers in the final act of our marriage. Eleanor arrived first with William, embracing me with genuine affection. "The place looks beautiful, Sarah," she exclaimed, handing me a homemade blueberry pie. "You've outdone yourself." "You know I love hosting," I replied, accepting the pie with a warm smile that didn't reach my eyes. Had she noticed the slight tremor in my hands? If so, she attributed it to the excitement of the day, rather than the emotional tempest brewing inside me. By noon, our property teemed with Carson family members, 36 in total, from Robert's 90-year-old grandmother to his cousin's newborn daughter. They sprawled across the deck and lawn, voices mingling with laughter, and the gentle lapping of lake water against our private dock. I moved among them with practiced grace, refilling drinks, directing people to food, engaging in small talk while maintaining emotional distance. "Sarah, this potato salad is divine," Robert's Aunt Margaret declared, helping herself to seconds. "You simply must share the recipe." "Family secret," I responded with a wink, knowing I'd never speak to this woman again after today at 2 o'clock. Robert approached me near the beverage table, wiping sweat from his brow. "James is asking about the fishing gear. Do we still have those extra rods in the garage? Check the storage bin near the kayaks," I instructed, watching as he pulled his phone from his pocket to check the time. "Thanks. Can you make sure Mom knows the burgers will be ready in 20 minutes? He set his phone down on the small wicker table beside me and headed toward the garage, pausing to chat with various relatives along the way. I stared at the phone, its black screen innocuous against the white tablecloth. For a moment, I considered the cosmic timing. Was this opportunity mere coincidence, or had the universe finally aligned to deliver justice? Either way, I wasn't about to squander the moment. I continued arranging drink pitchers, keeping one eye on the abandoned phone. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Robert became engrossed in a conversation with his brother and cousin near the dock, gesturing animatedly about something involving fishing lures. His phone remained forgotten. The first vibration was subtle. I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching so intently. The screen illuminated with an unsaved number, just digits without a name. I glanced toward Robert, still deeply engaged in conversation a good 50 yards away. The call ended, the screen went dark. 2 minutes later, it vibrated again, same number. Again, I let it ring through to voicemail. I picked up my glass of lemonade, taking a slow sip while maintaining my position near the forgotten device. Around me, the reunion continued in full swing, Eleanor organizing an impromptu group photo, children chasing each other across the lawn, William telling his famous college football stories to anyone who would listen. The third call came just as I was considering moving away from my post. Again, the same number. This time, I picked up the phone, holding it in my palm as it vibrated insistently. Robert remained oblivious, now helping his brother launch a kayak into the lake. When the screen went dark again, doubt flickered briefly. Was I ready for what would come next? The question vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. I was more than ready. The fourth call came less than a minute later. This time, I didn't hesitate. I swiped to answer, raising the phone to my ear without speaking. "Robert?" Melissa's voice was breathy, intimate. "I know you're busy with family stuff, but I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing." In that moment, a strange calm settled over me. All the anxiety, all the rehearsing, all the uncertainty, everything distilled into perfect clarity. I pressed the speaker button, making sure her voice would carry. "Why don't you come over?" I suggested, my voice steady and clear. Heads turned toward me, conversations pausing mid-sentence. "It's the perfect time." Robert's head snapped up from across the yard, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to horror in the span of heartbeats. "I found your messages," I continued, voice projecting across the suddenly silent gathering, "and I've already contacted a lawyer." Melissa's sharp intake of breath was audible through the speaker. "Who is this?" she demanded, though she must have already known. "This is Sarah, Robert's wife," I emphasized the last word, watching as Robert abandoned the kayak and began moving rapidly toward me. "We're having our family reunion today. Everyone's here, his parents, siblings, cousins. And now they all know about you too." "Oh my God," Melissa whispered. "Sarah, Save it," I interrupted. "I've seen the photos from San Diego. I know you were at our wedding. I know everything." Robert reached me, his face ashen. "Sarah, please," he said, reaching for the phone. "Give me the phone." I held it away from him, maintaining eye contact. "Why? So you can explain how this is all a misunderstanding? How I've got it all wrong?" I turned back to the phone. "Melissa, he told his entire office that we had an understanding. Did he tell you that too?" The silence that followed was answer enough. William and Eleanor stood frozen by the picnic table, identical expressions of shock on their faces. James had abandoned the kayak halfway onto the shore. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere. I handed the phone to Robert, who took it with trembling fingers. "She's all yours now," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I'm certainly not." As I walked away, I heard Melissa's voice still emanating from the speaker. "Robert, Robert, what's happening? Behind me, the perfect family reunion collapsed into chaos, exactly as I had planned. I stood in the center of the stunned silence, feeling strangely detached from the chaos unfolding around me. Robert stared at the phone in his hand as if it were a venomous snake, Melissa's voice still faintly audible through the speaker. Hang up, I said quietly. His eyes met mine, pleading. Sarah, please let me explain. There is nothing to explain. My voice carried across the yard, steady and clear. 18 months, Robert. Hotel receipts, jewelry she wore that was meant for me, vacations disguised as business trips. What exactly is there to explain? He finally pressed the end call button, silencing Melissa mid-sentence. The absence of her voice somehow made the moment more intense, forcing everyone's attention to the confrontation happening in their midst. Eleanor broke from her frozen position by the picnic table, moving toward us with uncertain steps. Robert, what is Sarah talking about? Robert's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. His usual smooth confidence evaporated completely. For a man who sold multi-million-dollar properties with charismatic ease, he suddenly couldn't form a single coherent sentence. Go ahead, I encouraged him, crossing my arms. Tell your mother about Melissa. Tell her how you've been sleeping with her for over a year while pretending to be on business trips. Tell her how you told everyone at your office that we had an open marriage to justify your behavior. William approached slowly, his weathered hand gripping Eleanor's shoulder for support, or perhaps to steady himself. His face had aged 10 years in 10 minutes, deep lines etched around his mouth as he stared at his son. Is this true? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The anguish in his father's voice seemed to pierce Robert's shock. Dad, it's complicated. It's a yes or no question, William interrupted, something I'd never heard him do before. Have you been unfaithful to Sarah? Robert looked around wildly, taking in the ring of shocked faces. His brother James, sister-in-law Caitlin holding their baby, cousins, aunts, and uncles all staring in disbelief. He was searching for an ally, an escape route, finding none. Yes, he finally admitted, the word hanging in the air like a gunshot. But it's not what you think. Things between Sarah and me haven't been right for a long time. That's news to me, I cut in. But then, I'm not the one who's been living a double life. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, a small wounded sound escaping her. She had always been proud of her close relationship with me, often bragging to friends about how lucky her son was to have found such a perfect match. Now her illusions were shattering alongside mine. I trusted you, she said to Robert, tears welling in her eyes. We all did. Robert reached for her hand. Mom, please. She stepped back, avoiding his touch. The rejection was small but devastating. In 20 seconds, he'd lost not just a wife but a mother's unconditional approval. His sister Emily pushed through the crowd, placing herself between Robert and me. How dare you, she hissed at her brother. After everything Sarah has done for this family. His cousin Tyler snorted from near the grill. Always thought you were too slick for your own good, Rob. Guess we know where all those client dinners really went. The murmurs grew louder, a rising tide of judgment and disappointment washing through the gathered family. Robert stood alone in the center, isolation forming around him like a physical barrier. Everyone, please, he finally said, raising his voice. This is between Sarah and me. It's a private matter. Is it? I challenged. When you made it public to your entire office, when you humiliated me behind my back, when you brought Melissa to our wedding? That last revelation sent another wave of shocked whispers through the gathering. Robert looked genuinely surprised. What are you talking about? Table 7, I said coldly. Check the wedding album. She was Tom's +1. She sat 15 feet away from us while we exchanged vows. Something cracked in William. He slammed his palm against the picnic table with unexpected force, causing plates to jump and glasses to topple. Enough, he shouted, his face flushed with anger. You bring another woman to your own wedding, and then you sleep with her behind your wife's back? Who raised you to behave this way? Because it certainly wasn't your mother and me. Robert flinched as if physically struck. In his entire life, I had never seen his father raise his voice to him. William had always been Robert's greatest champion, defending his every decision, celebrating his every success. That unwavering support had evaporated in an instant. Dad, he began. Don't dad me, William cut him off. Your grandfather built this family on integrity, on keeping your word, on honoring your commitments. His voice broke slightly. He would be ashamed to see what you've done. Eleanor began to cry openly now, supported by Robert's Aunt Patricia. James approached his brother, speaking low enough that only those nearby could hear. How could you do this to her, to all of us? I watched the family close ranks, not around Robert as they always had before, but around me. Emily's arm slipped around my waist. Caitlin approached with the baby, offering silent support with her presence. Even Tyler's wife, Jessica, whom I'd only met twice before, moved to stand beside me. Robert looked around at the wall of disapproval surrounding him, realization dawning that he had miscalculated severely. His careful compartmentalization of his two lives had collapsed completely, leaving him exposed and alone. Sarah, he said, his voice catching, can we please talk privately? Please. I shook my head slowly. I've given you 5 years of privacy, Robert. I think we're beyond that now. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is the name and number of my attorney. She's expecting your call. His hand trembled as he took the paper, reality finally sinking in. You're really doing this. You did this, I corrected him. I'm just ending it. The finality in my voice seemed to ripple through the gathering, whatever they had expected, from this family reunion. Laughter, reminiscing, strengthening bonds. This public implosion of a marriage many had considered ideal had permanently altered the Carson family dynamic. As I turned to walk toward the house, Emily still at my side, I heard William's voice behind me. "Robert, get your things. You won't be staying here tonight." The father had chosen sides, and for the first time in Robert's charmed life, he wasn't the favored son. Emily followed me into the house, closing the French doors behind us to muffle the commotion still erupting in the backyard. The sudden quiet felt surreal after the intensity of the confrontation. For a moment, we stood in silence in the kitchen, the reunion continuing its implosion outside the windows. "I knew something was wrong," Emily finally said, filling a glass with water and pressing it into my hands. "You've seemed different these past few months, but I never imagined this." I took a sip, realizing my throat was bone dry from the adrenaline. I didn't want anyone to know until I had everything in place. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, I answered, setting the glass down on the counter. But looking back, I think part of me suspected something much longer. I just didn't want to see it. Emily's eyes widened. 3 weeks, and you still hosted this reunion? Planned all this? She gestured around at the immaculate house with its carefully arranged platters and decorations. A small, grim smile crossed my face. I wanted witnesses. I wanted his family to see who he really is. Outside, I could see Robert gesturing frantically, William shaking his head firmly. Eleanor sat at the picnic table, Patricia's arm around her shoulders. Most of the extended family had pulled back, clustering in uncomfortable groups, unsure whether to leave or stay. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Now," I said, pulling a small overnight bag from the pantry where I'd hidden it that morning, "I finished what I started. I moved through the house with purpose, collecting items I'd mentally inventoried weeks ago, my laptop, the folder of financial documents from my desk, the small jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearls, the framed photo of my parents on their 30th anniversary, the only family picture I wanted from our curated collection." Emily trailed behind me, watching silently as I methodically gathered the fragments of my independent life. When I reached the master bedroom, I paused, steeling myself before entering what had once been our shared sanctuary. I'd slept beside him in that king-sized bed just last night, maintaining my charade until the final moment. "You don't have to go," Emily said from the doorway. "This is your house, too." "I know," I replied, opening the closet to retrieve the outfit I'd laid out that morning, clean clothes untainted by the memory of playing perfect hostess. "But I can't stay here tonight, not with all the echoes." I changed quickly in the bathroom, leaving behind the flowery sundress I'd chosen for the reunion. It felt symbolic somehow, shedding the costume I'd worn for my final performance as Robert's wife. When we returned downstairs, Robert was waiting in the living room, his face haggard. He'd clearly been crying, something I'd seen only twice in our marriage. William stood beside him, arms crossed, expression grim. "Sarah," Robert began, taking a step toward me. "Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I glanced at William, who nodded slightly. 5 minutes, I agreed. "Emily, would you mind waiting for me on the porch?" When they'd left, closing the door behind them, Robert sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, "but you have to believe I love you. This thing with Melissa, it was stupid, meaningless. I can end it, go to counseling, whatever it takes." 18 months isn't meaningless, Robert, I replied, remaining standing. "And you didn't just cheat, you lied to everyone. You created an entire alternate life." "I was weak," he admitted, "selfish. But losing you," his voice broke. "I can't lose you, Sarah." For a brief, treacherous moment, I felt a flicker of the love that had sustained me for 5 years. Then I remembered the photos from San Diego, the jewelry receipts, the calculated deceptions. "You already have," I said quietly. "The moment you chose her the first time." He looked up sharply. "So, that's it? 5 years of marriage just over?" "It was over long before today," I said. "I just didn't know it." I shouldered my bag. "Diana Moore has the divorce papers ready. This doesn't need to be messier than it already is." "And if I fight it?" he challenged, a flash of the old Robert, confident, entitled, emerging through his distress. "Then you'll lose twice," I said simply. "The evidence is comprehensive, and after today, I don't think you want your family witnessing more of your choices in court depositions." The fight drained from him visibly. "What about the house, our accounts? Talk to your lawyer," I replied. "Mine is very clear on what I'm entitled to." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Where will you go? That's no longer your concern." I paused at the door. "Your father says you should pack whatever you need for a few days. After that, we can arrange times for you to collect the rest when I'm not here." Outside, the reunion had largely dissolved. Most of the extended family had made awkward departures, leaving only the immediate family members. Emily waited on the porch swing, my car keys already in her hand. "Dad's taking Robert to a hotel," she explained. "Mom's staying with Aunt Patricia tonight." I nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline ebbed. "Thank you for standing by me today. You're still my sister," she said firmly, "regardless of what happens with him." Eleanor approached slowly from the garden, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture resolute. I braced myself for recrimination. Many mothers would instinctively defend their sons, regardless of the circumstances. Instead, she embraced me tightly. "I am so sorry," she whispered against my hair, "so deeply sorry for what he's done to you." Her unconditional support cracked something in my carefully maintained composure. For the first time since discovering Robert's betrayal, I allowed myself to truly cry, releasing weeks of calculated restraint in her arms. When we finally separated, she cupped my face gently. "Whatever happens next, you will always be family to us. Remember that." As Emily drove me to her house, I made 3 phone calls. First to Diana, confirming the day's events and next steps. Then to the locksmith I'd researched, scheduling an appointment for the following morning. Finally, to my school principal, requesting an additional personal day. With each call, another piece of my independent life clicked into place. The Sarah who existed before Robert, confident, self-sufficient, uncompromised, was emerging from the shadows of a marriage built on illusions. That night, in Emily's spare bedroom, I opened my laptop and systematically changed every password Robert might know. Email, banking, social media, cloud storage. With each new password, I felt another link in the chain binding us together snap free. The last thing I did before sleep claimed me was delete his contact from my phone, not blocked, simply deleted, as if he'd never existed. Tomorrow would bring complications, negotiations, the messy business of untangling two lives. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of my temporary sanctuary, I felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in 18 months, I wasn't sharing my husband with a ghost. The week following the reunion unfolded in a series of practical steps that kept me focused despite the emotional turbulence. I returned to the lake house on Monday, accompanied by the locksmith and Emily, who had taken a day off work to support me. We changed every lock, reprogrammed the garage door opener, and reset the security system codes. The tangible clicks of new tumblers falling into place felt like punctuation marks at the end of one chapter, and the beginning of another. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" Emily asked as we walked through the eerily quiet house, without the usual soundtrack of Robert's morning news shows or evening phone calls. The space felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors had gone home. "For now," I replied, running my hand along the kitchen counter. "I need to reclaim this space before I decide whether to keep it or sell it." Diana called twice daily with updates. Robert had retained counsel, a high-profile divorce attorney known for representing wealthy businessmen. They had requested a private meeting to discuss terms amicably, an overture Diana advised me to decline. "They're testing to see if you'll waver," she explained during our Wednesday check-in. "The evidence is solid. We proceed as planned." On Thursday morning, while organizing financial documents in the home office, I discovered a small velvet ring box hidden in Robert's desk, a 2-carat diamond earring set I'd never seen before. The receipt tucked inside showed a purchase date just 3 weeks earlier, another gift meant for Melissa, bought with our joint funds. I photographed it as additional evidence, then sealed it in an envelope for Diana. The first cracks in my composure appeared that evening when I found Robert's favorite coffee mug in the dishwasher. A mundane object, a navy blue ceramic cup with "World's Best Realtor" printed in faded letters, a gag gift from his first year in the business. I stood frozen in the kitchen, holding this relic of our domestic life, and suddenly found myself hurling it against the wall, a primal scream tearing from my throat as it shattered. I sank to the kitchen floor amid the ceramic shards, finally allowing myself to fully feel the grief that had been overshadowed by righteous anger and tactical planning. I wasn't just mourning a failed marriage, but the death of a future I'd believed in, the children we'd planned to have, the retirement we'd mapped out, the lifetime of shared memories that would never exist. Emily found me there an hour later during her daily check-in visit. Without comment, she helped me sweep up the broken pieces, then poured 2 glasses of wine. "It gets easier," she said, sitting beside me at the kitchen island. "Not today, or tomorrow, but eventually." "Did you know?" I asked suddenly, about Robert and Melissa. "Did anyone in the family suspect?" She looked down at her wine glass. "I saw them once," she admitted reluctantly, "at a restaurant in Ann Arbor about 6 months ago. They were in a corner booth, holding hands across the table." She swallowed hard. I convinced myself I was misinterpreting something, that it was a client meeting, or, I don't know, I didn't want to believe it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I should have," she said, eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I think I was trying to protect everyone, you, him, our parents. It was cowardly." I reached for her hand. "It's not your burden to carry. It never was." The following Tuesday brought an unexpected development. I was grocery shopping, a strangely liberating experience, buying only foods I enjoyed without considering Robert's preferences, when I turned my cart down the cereal aisle and came face to face with Melissa Winters. We both froze. Recognition immediate. She looked different from the confident professional I glimpsed at the hotel, smaller somehow, with dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The grocery basket hanging from her arm contained a pint of ice cream, a bottle of wine, and a package of Oreos, the universal shopping list of heartbreak. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My carefully constructed composure threatened to crack. Here was the woman who had systematically dismantled my marriage, standing in the cereal aisle of my regular grocery store as if she belonged in my world. "You should shop elsewhere," I said coldly, turning my cart to leave. "Wait," she called after me. "Please, 5 minutes." Every instinct screamed to keep walking, to deny her the closure of explanation or apology, but a small, persistent voice reminded me that understanding her perspective might help exorcise the questions that still haunted my sleepless nights. 4 minutes, I conceded, wheeling my cart to a quieter corner near the pharmacy. I ended it, she began without preamble. "After the call, after what happened at your reunion." "Congratulations on finally developing a conscience," I replied, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. She flinched but continued. "I deserve that. I deserve worse." She set her basket on the floor, hands trembling slightly. "He told me you were separated, living together for appearances but essentially divorced. And you believed that?" I challenged, despite seeing our wedding photos on his desk, despite the fact that I attended every company function as his wife. "I wanted to believe it," she admitted, gaze dropping to the floor. "By the time I realized the truth, I was already," she trailed off. "In love with him," I finished flatly. "How convenient for your conscience." "Not anymore," she said quietly. "The man I thought I knew doesn't exist." "The way he tried to manipulate everyone after your confrontation?" She shook her head. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing someone I didn't recognize. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, two women damaged by the same man in different ways. "Did you know I was at your wedding?" she finally asked. "I found the photos," I confirmed. "Table 7, you came with Tom." She nodded slowly. "I barely knew Robert then. We met briefly at the rehearsal dinner. I never imagined." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that he's lost everything now, not just you and his family's respect, but me too. Whatever game he was playing, he's left with nothing." I studied her face, searching for manipulation or a hidden agenda, finding only exhaustion and regret. "That brings me remarkably little comfort," I said honestly. "I didn't expect it would," she replied. "But you should know you're not alone in seeing through him now." She picked up her basket. "I'm moving back to Chicago next month. You won't have to worry about running into me again." As she turned to leave, a question escaped me before I could reconsider. "Was any of it real? What he said to you? What he felt?" She paused, considering. "I don't think Robert knows what real is anymore. He spent so long crafting different versions of himself for different people that I'm not sure even he knows which one is authentic." Her sad smile held no triumph, only shared recognition of a painful truth. "For what it's worth, I think what he felt for you in the beginning was as real as he's capable of." She walked away, disappearing around the corner, leaving me standing alone with my half-filled shopping cart and the strange, unexpected weight of pity, not for myself, but for both women who had built lives around a man who existed only in carefully crafted reflections. The divorce proceedings moved more swiftly than I had anticipated. Whether from shame, guilt, or simple pragmatism, Robert didn't contest the division of assets Diana proposed. The lake house was sold, the proceeds split, along with our investments and savings. My meticulous documentation of his financial infidelity, the gifts, trips, and dinners purchased for Melissa with our joint funds, resulted in a settlement that slightly favored me, a small victory that felt more symbolic than significant. I signed the final papers 6 months after the reunion in Diana's sun-drenched office with its thriving plants. The moment should have felt momentous, but as I watched my signature dry on the document, I felt only a quiet acknowledgement of an ending long overdue. "Congratulations," Diana said, sliding the papers into a folder. "You're officially divorced." "Thank you," I replied, surprising myself with a genuine smile. "For everything." "What's next for you?" she asked, removing her reading glasses. It was a question I'd been considering deeply. The settlement had left me financially secure, with enough to start over however I chose. The school year had ended, and for the first time in my adult life, I had no obligations to anyone but myself. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I'm looking forward to finding out." That evening, I invited Emily and my sister Kate over to my new apartment, a bright, airy space overlooking the river, with walls I'd painted myself in shades of blue and green. We opened a bottle of champagne, not to celebrate the end of my marriage, but to toast the beginning of whatever came next. "To Sarah 2.0, Kate declared, raising her glass, stronger, wiser, and finally free to become whoever she wants. It was a nice sentiment, but the reality of rebuilding proved more complicated. My identity had been so thoroughly entwined with Robert's that I sometimes caught myself making decisions based on his preferences, reaching for wines he would have chosen, avoiding restaurants he disliked, second-guessing career moves through the lens of what would have fit our shared life. I started small. I enrolled in a photography class I'd always wanted to take, but had postponed because it conflicted with Robert's bowling league nights. I let my hair grow longer, no longer maintaining the shoulder-length cut he had preferred. I adopted a rescue cat, a scraggly orange tabby with a crooked tail, despite Robert's lifelong insistence that he was allergic. "What's his name?" the shelter volunteer asked as I completed the adoption paperwork. I studied the cat's defiant green eyes, his resilient spirit despite whatever hardships had brought him to the shelter. "Phoenix," I decided. "His name is Phoenix." Summer turned to fall, and with it came an unexpected opportunity. The principal at my school approached me about developing a special arts-integrated curriculum for struggling readers, a project that would combine my teaching experience with my newfound passion for photography and visual storytelling. "It would mean reducing your classroom hours," she explained. "More administrative work, curriculum development, but I think you'd be perfect for it." Before Robert, I would have jumped at the chance. During our marriage, I had downplayed my career ambitions, focusing instead on creating the perfect home environment to support his success. Now, I said yes without hesitation. The project consumed my fall and winter in the best possible way. I worked long hours collaborating with art teachers and literacy specialists, developing a program that used visual narrative to engage students who struggled with traditional text. When we launched a pilot class in January, watching disengaged students suddenly find their voices through photography and storytelling felt like witnessing small miracles daily. Eleanor called regularly, our relationship evolving from in-law cordiality to genuine friendship. William sent thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts. Emily remained my strongest ally, Sunday brunches at our house becoming a cherished ritual. Robert's family had chosen to keep me in their lives, a decision that both touched and occasionally complicated my healing process. "Have you heard from him?" Eleanor asked carefully during one of our monthly phone calls, nearly 10 months after the divorce. "No," I answered truthfully, not directly, through mutual connections. I knew the broad outlines of his life. He had moved to Chicago, presumably following Melissa, though whether they had reconciled remained unclear. His career continued successfully. Betrayal, it seemed, was no impediment to selling luxury real estate. "It's probably better that way," Eleanor acknowledged. "But I want you to know that whatever happens with Robert, you'll always be family to us." As the 1-year anniversary of the reunion approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. The sharp edges of betrayal had dulled to a manageable ache, present but no longer debilitating. My new life had taken shape around me. A career with fresh purpose, a home that reflected only my tastes, friendships deepened by authenticity rather than social convenience. On the actual anniversary, I took a personal day and drove alone to Lake Michigan. The spring air carried a hint of warmth as I walked along the shoreline, watching waves crash against the sand. I found a quiet spot on a dune and retrieved a small box from my bag. Inside was the letter I had written to Robert the night before the reunion, words never delivered but preserved as a time capsule of raw emotion. I reread it once, acknowledging the pain and anger of that moment without being consumed by it. Then I tore it into tiny pieces, letting the wind carry them out over the water, watching as they disappeared into the vastness of the lake. My phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder about tomorrow's curriculum planning meeting. Real life, my new life. Waiting for me beyond this moment of ceremonial closure. I lingered a while longer, savoring the sense of completion before finally turning back toward the parking lot. As I reached my car, my phone rang, an unknown Chicago number. My heart skipped, then steadied as I silenced the call without answering. Whatever Robert might want to say a year later held no interest for me. There was nothing left to discuss, no loose ends requiring resolution. I sent a quick text to Emily, "Still on for dinner tonight?" "Absolutely," came her immediate reply. "The girls are excited to see their favorite aunt." I smiled, sliding behind the wheel. The rearview mirror offered a glimpse of the lake behind me, beautiful, but receding as I drove forward. 5 years of marriage had taught me much about love, commitment, and betrayal. But this year of rebuilding had taught me something far more valuable, the quiet strength of choosing myself day after day, without apology or compromise. The road ahead curved through spring green forests, leading away from the water and toward the city, toward dinner with Emily's daughters, toward next week's curriculum presentation, toward 1,000 small moments that would form the mosaic of my continuing story. Whatever chapter came next would be written entirely in my own hand, shaped by my own choices, independent of the shadow Robert had once cast across my life. I turned up the radio, opened the windows to the spring air, and drove on, not toward any specific destination, but simply forward.